I just Googled the word lawyer and was amazed to see not information about lawyers themselves, but rather article after news bite outlining the antics and public shame of celebrities or politicians, which happen to be the clients of some poor attorney, mentioned a few paragraphs later. The lawyer, disappearing into the turmoil. To the unattached observer, it just seems like lawyers are always in the middle of the bad stuff. But the reality is, those lawyers from high-profile firms really only represent 1% of the legal profession. According to the National Association for Law Placement, 83% of all lawyers who work in private practice are employed in firms of fewer than 50 lawyers, and almost 50% of those are working in solo or small firms. So if the majority of legal professionals aren't reflected in the majority of the news about legal, where does that leave them? Again, lost in the turmoil. That's what we're talking about today on Lawsome. Real lawyers building law firms and business models, both virtual and real, that ensure they don't disappear into the turmoil. Ready? Let's go.
Lawsome, the podcast for law firms. Powered by Consultwebs.
Welcome back to Lawsome, the only podcast for law firms that rounds up when we're counting exercise reps and rounds down when we're counting pounds. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain the legal community on the latest in personal and professional developments. I am Jake Sanders, the guy sitting on the rowing machine texting on my phone. I am joined by the Burgess Meredith of Training Champion Legal Websites Online, Paul Julius. Paul, cut my eye. I can do it.
I know. We can get you back in there.
Well, then just grab the razor.
Eyes every day.
Oh God, that's horrible.
Yeah, I know. It's just part of what we do here with websites. Cutting
eyes. You have to dot the I's. Cross the T's.
Anybody who hasn't seen Rocky is going to be like, what are these guys even
Burgess
doing?
Meredith is even more of a grab. But I think maybe, hopefully people will find that. Let's not be too obscure and let's just be sincere and tell people.
We're secure.
Well, don't be scared and tell people what's on the sheer to do.
On the show today, we talk about outsourcing legal and virtual law firms with articles from Law Clerk and the ABA. And then we sit down with lawyer and founder of Law Clerk, Greg Garman, to discuss freelance lawyers, changing business models, and how to take advantage of the gig economy for law firms. And as always, we run our guests through the ringer with 5 questions we ask everyone.
Pull up a plate. It's the Hot Takes Buffet.
The article today is from the Law Clerk Legal blog, which is on lawclerk.legal. It's Building Your Virtual Law Firm by the inevitable Dan Lear, friend of the pod. Paul, this is amazing. And I think the theme sort of discovered itself as we were talking to Greg, because we're, as we figure these shows out, we're not 100% sure. And we know that the interview will kind of help us discover it. But what a fascinating find. And so this will be paired with some survey results from a bar association survey, and then we'll talk about ABA. But going here first, Paul, your thoughts on the hot take of building your virtual law firm. You want to tell us what this is about?
It's pretty self-explanatory. It's about building a law firm, where maybe you don't actually exist to the same extent that you would think of a law firm now. And I think it's taking more of a service-based model. But we get into it more with Greg, but I think it's fascinating that Dan Lear wrote this because he has this kind of creative, entrepreneurial sort of approach and more of a project-oriented approach. And this is about talking about, he gets into the 3 kind of things you're going to want to deal with: reception, legal assistant, legal help like paralegal and lawyer. So the gist of it is, because of all these different services that are available, you could have someone answering your phone. You could have someone doing your, assistant work through using a virtual assistant. There's, either Upwork or there's actual dedicated legal stuff.
Mhm.
I know, Dean Eisenberg talks about it a lot.
Right.
And then you can find lawyers to do the work,
Right.
So it's like if you can get the cases, you can kind of spread this stuff out.
Mhm.
And it's not as difficult as it used to be, but it's a mindset.
And it's been a mindset in since you found that a bar association one from 2014, which they've updated to 2017, but it's the same kind of concepts. And talking to Greg, he kind of talks about the demographics of the legal profession. Well over half of legal, well over half of lawyers that are practicing are solo and small, 2 to 5 people firms. And so that's the majority, of the market.
right.
And they have less resources. They have less cognitive space inside people's heads, as that's okay. There's this single shingle just hanging out, some person in a coffee shop that's now my lawyer.
Pull
Maybe
up a
they
plate.
want that
It's the hot takes
briefcase.
buffet.
They want the leather-backed books. So we get into some of that because it's perception too, which touches on marketing, which Dan kind of addresses in those 3 things, which is who's going to answer for you, who's going to help you process the work, and who, helps you stand accountable for it. But what Law Clerk is doing on their blog is helping coalesce all of these resources into a marketplace where you can have access to the team, access to those things that you can build your law firm business around. And so I think that's when you discovered that, theme is building this virtual law firm. It's interesting because we're talking to possibly people who work in big law, a small percent, people who work in a larger law firm, a larger percent. And then the overwhelming majority are just people out there slanging justice, So, but it was interesting too to pair this with the Bar Association survey opinions from Florida when they talked to lawyers in the Florida bar about how they use technology, what they have, what kind of infrastructures they have that could help accommodate case management or help run things. And a large majority of those people have no, let me see what it is. Case management program. Do you primarily use? There's Clio, Client Profiles, Time Manager, Abacus, Prola, Rocket. And then 64% have no case management program. And 78% have no document management system. 92% say that they have no litigation support software. There's CaseMap, Concordance, and then some other stuff that just falls off the map. The story here is there's the thought that everyone needs to be enterprising and entrepreneurial, but they don't. There's sort of this technologically averse thing. And then there's the overwhelming preponderance of vendors flooding in to catch all of this money, that's happening around legal. So it's fascinating to be in the middle of this and just wonder, what's the true answer? And how could somebody feel that they had the security of a big law thing and the flexibility of a small firm? So I think it's fascinating to see Greg talk about it. And you brought up Dave Craig a couple episodes ago. We had him on, and he had this sort of mentality too. Where were you going with that?
It struck me about Dave that that whole episode was really about looking around you for opportunities that exist, but maybe you don't recognize or don't know how to capitalize on. And I think what we kind of find out talking to Greg later is that those opportunities, it doesn't, in Dave's episode, we were talking about how, if you're unsatisfied with the documents you're getting, he started his own copy company, basically his own printing company.
Right.
They did their own medical records. Wasn't it something like that? Medical records
exactly
or medical
right.
Stuff like that company. Because they just, you want to be treated like the best client, then it's your company. You're going to get it. And you can offer those services, once you have a system in place. Well, what we're kind of seeing here with Greg is that what he was saying was that there are three different, obviously there's different subsets of this, but he said, overwhelming, there's three categories of people who use Law Clerk. They need an extra set of hands, because they have too much work, or they want to get into a service they don't typically offer. And this one, to me, out of the whole interview, was the one that really lit up to me the most, because here, I think lawyers need to flip their perspective and try and turn that legal brain off for a minute and think about how people look at you. You're a lawyer. If I have any legal question, I get into a car accident, I got a ticket, I got to do something to my will, I have a real estate issue, I just, whatever. Oh yeah, this guy's a lawyer. I'll go ask him.
Oh, and they're constantly getting questions. Oh, right. I'm not your lawyer, so I'm not going to help. I'm not your lawyer, so I can't help.
Right. Or I don't, you know what? I'm a bankruptcy lawyer. Right. So, I don't really do that. But
leave me alone. We're at Olive Garden,
Yeah, totally. Please, sir, this isn't Arby's. But that's the thing where here, what Greg goes into a little bit later is here, you can keep that client and get that service. There's this pool of talent. And I think that's something that builds on what Dave Craig is talking about. Is there's an opportunity. There's a thing where you can say, it's just a change of your mindset. You have to shift away from, I'm doing everything myself. I, make artisanal lease agreements,
bespoke.
And to just saying, hey, look, people want to deal with me and I can handle that, but we can outsource some of this other stuff. And that's a great way to start to, build into these other things. And then that's why we were looking at some of these articles and stuff about taking it to its next logical extension of saying, hey, I have an entire virtual practice area, or maybe even a virtual law office built on this system, this approach, this way we do business now.
But that's why I wanted to pair it with the opinion survey, because these people don't, I'm sorry. That's why I wanted to pair it with the opinion survey, because lawyers sort of perforce, or lawyers just coming out of school or even years into their practice, they're not necessarily ready to adapt all of these tools and technologies to wield them like the octopus sushi samurai that people need you to be now. Right. You can't just be my lawyer. You have to be now my, wills and estates person. Then you have to, do this. I have a ticket. I have, this, and I have a question, and I'm here for you. I'm here for you. I have an app. I have everything. I'm just thinking, in some weird way, maybe people don't want to go there because there was some anonymity, or there was some process where I could just do what I like. Yeah. And, I think Law Clerk is giving us both, but just like you said, it's a change in your mindset. It's a change in your mindset that needs to happen. Processes, projects, business kind of thoughts, supply, demand, chains, in and outs. Those things need to start being considered. And Greg has a mind on both building businesses and running law firms, because he's done both. He actually does both right now. Yeah. But great concepts, good themes, and we're excited to bring this. This is a great interview. So let's jump into it.
Let's go.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Since 1999, Consultwebs has been helping law firms connect with clients on the web, connect digital marketing success with firm success, and connect their business goals to proven strategies that help them get the most out of their legal marketing. Go to consultwebs.com to learn more.
And now, a Lawsome interview.
Greg Garman is the driving force behind Law Clerk, where attorneys find freelance lawyers to help on a project basis. Greg has spent more than 20 years in law, both as a managing partner at a regional firm and founder of a boutique firm that quickly developed a national reputation. As a thought leader in the legal industry, Greg is years ahead of the market in realizing that the traditional law firm business model will soon be a thing of the past. Greg, thanks for joining us today on Lawsome.
Guys, thanks so much for having me. I am a big fan of the show and love what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
That's a shock.
Yes.
But let's go get a little rundown on Law Clerk, a little backstory on the problems you were trying to solve, and then provide us with context where you're at today.
Yeah. So I was the managing partner at a law firm that I had been at for, 17, 18 years. I started as a summer associate and worked my way up to partner and then worked my way up to managing partner. And we had 6 offices around the country, and things were going really, really well. The middle of the market was hot in the 2000s. We had a lot of really, really talented lawyers join us. But I'm not the first. I might not be the 100,000th person to say the law firm business model is changing before our eyes. And there came a point where I concluded that the long-term demographics of the business, even though we were doing so well, was simply something that I believed to be unsustainable over a long period of time. And after a lot of soul searching, I and some of my partners decided that it'd be best to open a boutique where we were more in control of our future, more in control of conflicts, more in control of the fee structures we wanted to charge. Get away from a lot of things that everybody who's been at a larger firm complains about. So we opened Garman Turner Gordon. And in part of that process, we came to love the fact that, we were much smaller. We were still 20 lawyers in size, but we didn't have a securities lawyer. We didn't have a tax lawyer. We didn't have a lot of those people that on a bigger platform you tend to be able to rely upon. But the business model was so much better. And so Law Clerk really came out of our own experience of the good and the bad of the historical business model. And we concluded that there had to be a way to ethically, put together a marketplace and a virtual team that we could go to from time to time to get some of that work done without having, the fixed overhead of having to have 100 lawyers under the roof. And so really, the evolution of the business model is at the heart and soul of what we're trying to help lawyers change. I've been doing this 20 plus years. Since the first CLE I ever went to when I was a young lawyer, people keep repeating the mantra that the billable hour is dead. And well, it's not. It's not, because we have tons of business models to replace the billable hour, but none of them are as profitable as the billable hour. And that's why it doesn't go away yet. And so, we're on the mission to help lawyers improve the business model in a way that maintains or even potentially expands margins, and at the same time does all those great things: access to justice, reduce the cost of legal services, lowers your overhead. So that really is the mission and the backstory of how we came to be.
I have a friend who's a lawyer. It's kind of a small firm, and he tells me that something that he runs into, him and his partner run into, is when they want to get involved in some of like a bigger case, which they don't often. I mean, they're fortunate enough they can be kind of selective, but they run into trouble where there's so many things. They don't have like an e-document review system because they just don't need it for the majority of their stuff. So it's kind of interesting that there's resources like Law Clerk that they could reach out to. But I'm curious, so for firms like his or other law firms out there that might want to use Law Clerk but are hesitant to outsource, what are the typical roadblocks you experience when you're bringing a client on board? And what are the solutions, like security, timelines, stuff like that? What's the top 3 or something that you would say happen?
Yeah. So yesterday was kind of a milestone for us in that we put our 2000th lawyer on the system yesterday. And so we've got a pretty good track record over the last year of, figuring out the roadblocks. Honestly, the biggest one is lawyers just have to kind of get out of their own way. What we do is important, and what we do is really meaningful in this profession. And I'm proud to be a lawyer, and I remain a practicing lawyer. But at the end of the day, it's rare that we're ever starting a document from scratch. It's rare that an associate or a paralegal can't get us 85% of the way through a document, and the partner just simply finishes it at the end of the day. The biggest things that we encounter are people, one, they conclude that if they're a solo or a small firm, they have to do it themselves. They're accustomed to that. The one of those amazing statistics in this industry is that 50% of the practicing lawyers in the country are a solo practitioner, one man or woman in a shingle out front. So, they're used to doing it themselves. They don't trust other people to do it. That's probably the biggest one. The second biggest thing that we encounter that when people use Law Clerk, they get over really fast is that they're worried that the talent pool is a bunch of newbies who couldn't get a job somewhere and are looking to take on project work, and that is just simply the farthest thing from reality. It's a little bit off note, but when I look back at the technology companies over the last couple of years who've really made an impact in marketplaces, you look to the obvious ones. You look to Airbnb, you look to what Uber's been able to do, you kind of look to what Amazon's done, and even 20 years later, you look to kind of what eBay has done. And the reality is that Airbnb and Uber in particular, they found that there was a really big investment of infrastructure in the world. Airbnb found there were vacation houses and rooms that weren't going used. And obviously Uber and Lyft found that there are cars that sit idle 95% of the time. And they created marketplaces, but really what they did is they put this idle fixed asset, these investments to use. And that's really what we do at Law Clerk, is that 6 in 10 lawyers leave private practice before their 5th year. Some of it's involuntary that, they couldn't get it, but the majority of those people are, they found that raising children was incompatible with working 12 hours a day, or, there's a health scare in the family or parents or, whatever the case may be. But we have, literally trillions of dollars of investment in legal education and training that firms have done. And there are hundreds of thousands of people who decided they couldn't or didn't want to work 12 hours a day, but have incredible skill sets. The sweet spot of our business are, think the stay-at-home parent who was trained at a big law for 5 or 6 years and has a really good skill set, but they're raising a child. Military spouses are like this growing piece of our couple thousand of freelance lawyers, in which the husband or wife may be a senior officer in the military and they have to move around every 2 or 3 years, and the spouse who's a lawyer can't take a bar every 2 or 3 years. We have retired AmLaw professors, AmLaw partners who want to stay in the game, and they don't necessarily need the money, but they want to keep their brain active. We've got law school professors who have summers and breaks. We recently had a Supreme Court brief go through the site, and
Nice.
I believe that a law school professor, did a segment of it on the site, and that was a really cool day for us. And then obviously we have young lawyers to do research memos and written work product and document reviews and those sorts of things. But those are the two big ones.
You see it on social media. People are saying, people are pumping out JDs, and there's just like homeless lawyers on the street. I don't know what they're doing. We'll draft a memo for food or something.
Well, that's sort of that's sort of the problem that we're trying to solve, is that when I joined the ranks of being a lawyer, from then until now, our headcount of practicing lawyers, not just lawyers who graduated from law school, but of practicing lawyers, has grown by 40%. But at the same time, legal services as a percentage of the U.S. economy is actually declining. It peaked in about 2006 at just shy of 2% of the overall U.S. economy, which is like a staggeringly huge number. It's like $350 billion or something. But it's declining. And so, we have an increase of 40% in headcount and a decrease of a percentage of the economy being devoted to legal services. And that is a tidal wave of on the wrong side of a supply-demand curve that I don't think the profession is really paying attention to in a way that they should. And at the end of the day, that causes great upheaval and disruption. And, we think we're one of the tools to help, mitigate some of the damage that comes with that.
Wow. Yeah. So we were the next question is basically, what do you think legal schools can do? Educational internships, any kind of those models that you think are looking good educationally wise, something that can meet that? Or is it just it's every lawyer for herself, or what are we looking at here?
Well, I think, I think long term, there's a couple of big trends that we need to deal with. First is, I'm not alone in this. I'm sure there are too many law schools. When a profession is no longer growing, there's no doubt that the 35 or 40,000 or whatever the number is a year that we're pumping out is too many, and some of those marginal law schools are clearly going to have to shut down, and we're going to have to produce less students, but less graduates. But the second thing is that when we now live in a world in which, it used to be that you would go out and you get a job for a law firm and you'd sort of pick up the business model and you'd get 5-6 years under your belt. And then, maybe there'd come a day where you'd want to open your own firm and you would have learned some of those practical skills. That day, that kind of passed. And a huge percentage of people who are in private practice now went right from law school to opening a firm, without really understanding and without having the law schools train them in the business aspects of what they needed to do. Like, how do you draft a legal rep agreement? The simple stuff, the practical stuff. And so, if I were in charge of the legal education system, yeah. I would re-implement some form of kind of apprenticeship training instead of some of those third-year classes. I remember, in my third year, I took some things that like bioethics that were really interesting, but probably didn't prepare me in any way for what I'm doing today. And so maybe, we drop some of those electives that we require for third year of law school and put a practical apprenticeship or internship or something back in the system to be able to change it.
Yeah, definitely.
I've heard it before too, that people have to, in the summer when you're in law school, you gotta snag that internship somewhere. Otherwise, if you graduate without any experience, you're sunk. Like, who's going to hire you?
Yeah. There are a couple of law schools out there that, are always going to be immune to that, that have marquee names, and then there's the 95% of the law schools that produce a disproportionate number of really, really talented lawyers. And it used to be in this profession that if you were a good lawyer, you'd get at bats. You get a chance to prove yourself. You'd get interesting cases where you could go show what you were made of and build a reputation. And I just think it's so difficult now that I'm fearful that if you come out of law school now or in the last 5 years, you may not get the same chances or the same at bats simply because there's too many of us.
And it's a weird thing because look at access to justice, for example. There's a lot of stuff there that maybe we don't need a full-on lawyer handling something like entering submitting evidence or something in a simple custody case or something like that. But you can't, it has to, we can't have someone in, their last year of law school managing some of these things where they could get that experience. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's a bad example, but
I don't know. It's kind of like the medical profession,
Sure.
I in no way am advocating that lawyers who graduate need to go spend like 5 or 6 years interning or something like that.
Yeah.
But there is that system built into medicine in which there is more practical on the ground training, and some of that does solve some of society's ills when it comes to underinsured or uninsured. And I think that access to justice, it's not that we don't have the capacity. It's that we haven't figured out the business models to implement that will grant us, broader access to legal services. And to me, there are educational issues we can address. There's sort of these things we've talked about, but to me, legal is the largest piece of the U.S. economy that hasn't been disrupted by a technology. It hasn't disrupted its business model. We're just shy of 2%. And a lawyer in a time machine who moved forward 75 or 100 years would find what we do today to be exactly the same thing they did before. They'd find computers on the desk, they'd find, e-discovery systems, but billing our time, leveraging younger lawyers, it is exactly the same business model, and it's an incredibly lucrative and profitable business model. But we've got to find a way to change the business model through the use of technology. And that's really the challenge that we set out. When we go around the country to legal tech conventions, there's really, really great companies, but none of them are really changing the business model. The practice management software, we use it in our firm. Really great software that makes us, more efficient. It allows us to bill more hours a day, get our invoices to the clients easier, store our documents better. That's all great, but none of it really changes the business model. And I think what we as an industry need to focus on, and what we at Law Clerk are focusing on, is giving tools that actually allow you to go, if you're a lawyer, to go look at what you're doing and look at how you're doing it and try and find a way to cut down on overhead. And so an example we always use is the old business model for an associate used to be 1/3 of their collected dollars goes to their compensation, and 1/3 goes to overhead, and 1/3 supposed to go to the profit of the partner. But if they're not efficient, the profit goes away first. And so, a lot of associates aren't even particularly profitable. But the reality is that there's a third of that old model goes to overhead that we don't think in this world needs to be consumed by expensive real estate, by the typical things that a third has to pay for. And so, when we often get asked, on the site, how should I price a project? And I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but one of the things we always tell people is, figure out what the billable value of your work might be. You can still pay a freelancer the same thing they would make as an associate, kind of a third of what you expect it to be. But then if you've cut out the overhead, if you've cut out that third of the business model, you can find a way to be just as profitable or more profitable while delivering legal services cheaper. And at the end of the day, that's the holy grail. How do we keep this a profession that hires the brightest, so that we do provide great service to people, but at the same time find a way to make it delivery cheaper, and that's what we're working towards.
Looking at continuing to discuss sort of the offerings and the business model, and Law Clerk it seems to be kind of a mini legal procurement brokerage with transactional flat fees, flexible teams focused on projects. I can't recommend enough to everybody go and see all the stuff you can do using Law Clerk. And on top of it, it integrates with Clio, which is super cool. But to take the next step, these things, this is going to transfer to like a client-facing product, right? I mean, someday, do you see yourself getting in there with Rocket Lawyer and LegalZoom?
Nope. We
never mind.
No, we don't. Let me tell you why.
I object.
Damn it.
So I think there's a lot of really good companies out there who are forward-facing and client-based, and I think they're doing important and kind of interesting work. But our goal, like I said, was to change the business model, and to change the business model, we've worked with bar associations around the country. And at the end of the day, our customers are those 1.3 million lawyers in the country. And so, there's a lot of companies out there that we admire even, who kind of grow out of a staffing business. You've had Lawyer Exchange on before, Hire and Esquire's out there. There's these really great companies that we like, and we compete with them, but we do things a little bit different at Law Clerk. So what we've there's communities of lawyers, and there's always been communities of lawyers who kind of work together, share work, build relationships. But what's been lacking in this industry for solos and smalls is, hard, dedicated tools that allow you to take the next step in building your business. And so, when you look at the people who use law clerk, they typically fall into three categories. There's the small and solos, who, and by the way, the overwhelming bulk of everybody who uses the site are small and solo firms. That's who we cater to. Right. That's who we build the tools for. Big law has so much in the way of excess capacity and too many associates and unbillable time. Like, they don't need a product like ours. So we cater to solos and smalls. And so the three categories of people who use us day in and day out are the people we call I need an extra set of hands. They're a solo, a 1, 2. They have the ebbs and flows of work, trials come up, and sometimes there's too much work for them to get done. And then sometimes they don't have enough work and they get a little extra time off. When there's too much work to be done, we're the perfect tool, and that you can hire a freelance lawyer to help you prepare for trial and get the memos ready and get the motions in limine. And then when you don't need them, they're not fixed overhead. So that's the first user. The second user is the people who, they got a client who comes in the door and, they tend to be, they can do anything, but they tend to be, for instance, an estate planning lawyer. And they got a client who comes in who needs a will. Who needs a lease. They do wills and trusts, and any of us who've been to law school can do a simple lease, provided it's not for something super complicated. And they could do it, but it's not an efficient use of their time. They don't have cutting edge forms. And the last thing they want to do is send them down the street to some other lawyer who may poach them. So so they go on the site, they say, I'm willing to pay $400 for a lease for a Quiznos to go in the strip mall or whatever the case may be. They find somebody who's got that skill set, who's got the forms, who knows that area of law. Both of them make more money than they otherwise would have. Clients happy, great delivery of legal services. And then the third user, and this is the fastest growing segment of our user base, are people who've decided that they're going to build entire business models around our platform. They build a virtual law firm of people they work with day in and day out. And they have somebody who does their real estate work. They have somebody who does their memo drafting. But they don't have enough work to keep these people busy full time. So they work with them when they need them. And so we have literally lawyers who've put 100+ projects on the site, who log in daily, hourly to get work done, because the idea of having a virtual team of associates is not only a more profitable way to run a law firm, you can actually deliver better services because you have subject matter experts. And so those are the three camps of people who use our site. We're always going to protect our customers. We're not going to try and go around them to get into their business, which is selling directly to clients. And there's a lot of those companies, and they do it well. But we want to be like a trusted partner in the long run, so that attorneys who are solos and smalls can really build a business model, and we want to be there with them as they do it.
Well, I want to hire you. I'm just like, yeah, I want to be with Greg. I want to hang out with Greg. It's amazing, man. And I think, talking about those vendors, those legal marketing vendors, everybody who's pushing towards law firms, it's interesting that they're sort of ignoring the solos because that's the majority of the market and they need as much help. And in some way, they're going to define the way law firms behave. It's some weird kind of way. It's like, at some point, you want to feel safe with a big law firm, but you love to see the flexibility of small boutique firms. And then once you're a small boutique firm, you feel like, man, I really wish I had some security. And I think this is a way for people to live in the liminal worlds between those two places and find security. But then also there's people who just got degrees and just gave up, and they work at Pier 1 and they're just folding throw pillows and they're like, what am I doing? there's a chance for them to get in, and have those skills because it's important. And
Well, let me, if you don't mind me comment on a couple of those things,
go ahead.
that's exactly why we do this. And it sort of gets me excited to talk about this because one of the most amazing statistics in our business is that 3 out of every 4 practicing lawyers are in a firm of 5 or fewer lawyers. We think of the world thinks of law in the context of big law, of am law 100, 200. But yet that's less than 1% of the lawyers in the country. But a disproportionate amount of technology has been built for them. And I get it. They're really profitable. But think of this. The last time I looked, Greenberg Traurig had the largest number. They're not the biggest firm in the world, but the last I looked, they had the largest number of lawyers in the United States. And it was a number well south of 2,000. The largest player is 2,000 out of 1.3 million. You don't find other industries like that. And so we do live in a world in which half the lawyers in the country are solos and 3 out of every 4 are affiliated with a firm of 5 or fewer. And most of those people are, sharing overhead. They're sharing conference rooms. They're sharing a secretary. They're not really a firm in the context of they have 1 real estate lawyer and 1 bankruptcy lawyer and a litigator. And there is really a lack of technology that's been built, I think, for those small firms. I think that, Clio and some of the others have done a really, really nice job of building infrastructure technology. But like I said, it's not business model changing technology. And so what separates us from our competitors is that we spent more than a year pre-launch building the site so that we're not just a dating site. We're not just sort of putting 2 people together. We built a payment system in which we hold the money in escrow until the attorney who posts the project or the hiring attorney is 100% satisfied. We built a Dropbox-like system to securely share documents. We built a Slack features, the communication system in the site so that people could feel comfortable sharing, communicating in that way. We dealt with conflicts on like a 3-level basis. We had, at the time of launch, we had spent 14,000 development hours, which was like 300,000 lines of code, which is kind of lost on me. I just know it's a lot. Building what really is a marketplace. And so there's a lot of companies and organizations out there that are trying to facilitate kind of relationships among freelance lawyers and the attorneys who hire them. But we really set out to build a bunch of concrete tools to implement on a daily basis to actually grease commerce so that people could actually, quickly get engaged in profitable business, make money, and at the same time build the relationships. So, it wasn't until version 3 a couple of weeks ago, when we built the Teams feature that now really allows you to hire and pick the freelancers you want to work with before you even have work. And so, now you can go out and say, I'm a solo small and I have real estate work from time to time, and I'm working, I need somebody who's familiar with Texas law and, the thousands of freelancers we have, the ones who that fits their skill set. They apply to work with you. And we now really have people building virtual law firms for work only when they need it. And it's a really satisfying thing to see it work, and it grows every single day.
Talking about business models, it strikes me very near and dear to my heart about how looking at things as more of a project. And I'll tell you why. Before years and years and years ago, I was in manufacturing. So I'm very familiar with, looking at things from like how long a part takes to run, how many parts per thing, stuff like that. And what would happen to us is a current client that we manufactured things for would come to us and say, hey, I need one of these. Well, we didn't have the machines to do that, but we had a network of people that we could just throw the blueprint out there and they would bid on it. We'd tack a little bit on the price. We keep our client happy. Those people got work. It's a very common thing in manufacturing. And so I'm fascinated. I love it when I see that kind of stuff happening. Like, hey, exactly like you said, we can keep this client happy. And you know what? They don't give a damn who actually does the work. Just get it done. Make them happy. Give them what they want.
So if I had to give a third reason that there's a hurdle to people doing this, you kind of put your finger on it in the inverse. Um, Lawyers in other industries, it's a value add to say, I have these resources I can draw upon just when we need them, and clients get the fact that you may not need a full-time video production camera person, when you're doing marketing that includes video. Like, they get that, but for some reason in the legal industry, lawyers don't want to say, oh yeah, I've got this freelancer that I'm going to work with. They like to, be able to say they can do it in-house. And I'm not entirely sure why that is. But it happens all the time. I think that we're going to get very quickly to a world in which the clients are saying, yeah, they're comfortable with the fact that they can get a better product cheaper, because the world is full of specialists. Medicine saw it 20 years ago. Engineering saw it a long time ago. And we have it in the legal industry. Clients go to lawyers because they don't want the lawyer to tell them that they're going to be okay. I mean, they want that at the end of the day, but they don't want a lawyer to lie to them and say everything's going to be fine. They want somebody to worry about the problem for them and to give them the best solution. And that oftentimes for smalls and solos is going to be most effectively done with the freelance lawyer. So this morning, as I was preparing for this, I was kind of looking over the site to see the projects that came in. And to your point about speed, there was a project that was posted this morning. And in the project description, it said, I'm paying a premium for this. I'm offering a premium for this memo that I need done. I think it was a memo, not a pleading. But I need it by 8:00 tonight. And that's something that most small firms, they couldn't get done on that timeline, simply because, you've got your other cases, you got to manage it. But the beauty about having on-demand services to draw from thousands of freelance lawyers is you can find exactly what you need. And if you need it, we don't recommend that people go out and say, I have 6 hours to get a pleading done, because, we all know you're going to get something better done if you have a couple of days. But if you have that emergency, you have this resource to draw upon. And that happens from time to time. And at the end of the day, it allows us to do our jobs better, produce a better product for the client. And what most lawyers don't understand is that it's totally ethical to treat and to mark up the freelance lawyer's time the same way you would a paralegal or an associate, and leverage the time for a profit, and delivery of cheaper legal services that are more profitable for the attorneys is the holy grail of what we're trying to do. And it really does work. And every day, more and more people are using us as one of the ways to get that done.
So, and then last, real quickly, your clients, some of the feedback, just real quick, some of, somebody saying like, there was no way I could do this without you. Do you have a story like that? Or
yeah. So
just real fast, and then I'm kicking you out.
So I'll stay all day. So from a global perspective, we have every attorney. So one of the important things on the site is that the attorney who posts the job decides who they want to work with. They pick who they want to work with, and they review resumes and writing samples, of course. But one of the big value adds that we give is that they get to review the previous reviews of every single project that has been completed on the site by that freelance lawyer. And one of the things we're proud of is that when the ratings come in, about 7 out of every 10 times, the lawyer says, the rating system is, you can leave as many comments as you want, but it's also the lawyer didn't meet my expectations, the freelancer met my expectations or exceeded my expectations. About 7 out of 10 times, the review says the freelancer exceeded the work product that they were hoping to get. And that's just, just music to our ears, and that we are really delivering specialized knowledge that lawyers are trying to get. What we most like to hear are when people say, I found 4 or 5 people, they produce great work in different areas, and I produce a better work product for my client. They get me 75 or 85% of the way there. And that's wonderful. Like I said, the smallest projects that go through the site are demand letters, probably. We get tons of appellate work that goes through the site. and that U.S. Supreme Court brief. We're eagerly looking to the outcome of that to see if we can talk about a win we had. But that's what we hear is the work product is better. We hear it day in and day out, and that's the basis of the value we're providing.
It's gold. It's gold. Greg, oh my God. So how can people learn more about you and Law Clerk?
Yep. So lawclerk.legal is the website. There is, there's sample projects. But what I would encourage is that feel free to call us. The numbers on the site, we help walk people through their first project all the time. It's difficult to figure out how much to pay, who to pick. We really do love to interact with people. So check us out on the website at lawclerk.legal, but feel free, it's fully automated, but feel free to call us, and we just love walking people through their first projects. And almost every time, if you use us once, people come back time and time and time again and build a business around us.
5 questions we ask everyone.
What was the last book you read?
The Boys in the Boat, about the Washington State rowing team that went to the Germany Olympics.
Solid.
Wow.
It's really great, by the way. Like, I don't recommend a lot of books. I'm a pretty prolific reader. I read 45, 50 books a year, but that one is super happy with it, and I bought it for about 10 people last week.
Nice.
Wow.
Can't get any higher recommendation than that. All right. Number 2, what is your favorite place?
So I was born in Las Vegas. I think this is the greatest city in the world. I left to go to school because Nevada didn't have a law school at the time, but I came home in order to both build a practice and build a business here. People don't really know this, but Las Vegas is the largest city in the world that was founded, in the 1900s. And as much as I like to travel other places, I can't say enough about my hometown, and I do love it here.
Nice. Everyone go visit. Number 3, what sites, blogs, newsletters, or podcasts do you regularly check in with?
So from a podcast perspective, of course, I listen to you guys. I really do. I really am a big fan, and I do listen to you. But How I Built It is probably one of my favorite sites from a podcast perspective. I'm a lawyer by training, but I will say that my passion is probably building companies. I have decided to turn off internet news, and that somebody gave me this bit of advice one time, and they said, ask yourself what news article you read in the last year had a lasting impact on your life, and the answer is probably none. But ask yourself, of the books you read in the last year, like how many of them made some difference in the way you behave or act? And I really took that to heart. So I read the Wall Street Journal online on Saturdays, but other than that, I've turned off news from my daily consumption of the internet.
It's good advice. It's good advice.
Totally,
Number 4, if you were stranded on a desert island and could only pick one condiment to take with you, what would it be?
Mustard.
Yes, absolutely.
Mustard.
Well, that's the question. Is it yellow? Is it grainy? Does it have like little seeds in it?
Yeah.
So
What are we talking?
it'd be jalapeno based, like a spicy mustard.
What?
Nice.
Yeah. I
Spicy
don't know.
book.
I don't know what you put it on your desert island, but
that's part of the question.
Yeah.
It
I don't think it goes well with
lives out there.
We have to build that up.
fish.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Last one, number 5. After a long day or long week at work, how do you relax and unwind?
So I'd like to say that I still perceive myself to be a golfer, but I now have 2 full-time jobs in practicing law and law clerk. So I try to ski whenever I can. And at the end of the day, like, my real hobby is as far away from technology or anything as you could possibly imagine. I'm a woodworker. Might be one of the younger woodworkers in the world, but that really is like turning my brain off from everything that I do and working with my hands in a sawdusty garage is incredible therapy. And that's what I would, if I could make a living doing that, I'd give it real consideration.
For show notes, links, and info, go to thelawsomepodcast.com or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. Be sure to leave us a review and rating in iTunes or wherever you find the you listen to. Until next week, stay lawsome.